Man, Dad, you just...
Yep.
Man,
Just keep going.
you keep not... This is what you keep doing.
Footage circulating online has reignited debate about the relationship between Will Smith and Jaden Smith, pulling years of archived moments into a new and more critical light. What once looked like playful banter or an over-enthusiastic father, guiding his son is now being re-examined through the lens of shifting power, public controversy, and personal evolution. The clips going viral are not from one single incident, but from multiple appearances across different years. Interviews, promotional shoots, talk show moments, edited together to suggest a long-running dynamic between a globally famous father and a son who has spent much of his life trying to define himself beyond that shadow. Context has changed everything. Since the 2022 Academy Awards incident, when Will Smith slapped Chris Rock on live television, audiences have viewed older footage with heightened scrutiny. The slap damaged the carefully built image Will maintained for decades, and as he works through a public comeback, the internet has revisited older moments that now appear layered with tension rather than humor. One frequently resurfaced clip comes from a promotional shoot for Jaden's company, Just Water. In the footage, Will stands behind the camera directing while Jaden stands in front, attempting to promote a business he co-founded as a child. What was meant to be a straightforward promotional video unfolds awkwardly, with Will issuing rapid instructions and Jaden pushing back, confused by the direction. A line that drew particular attention was Will joking aloud that perhaps Willow should have done the shoot instead. Taken alone, it might read as teasing. Placed beside other clips, it appears to some viewers as a father stepping into a space meant to belong to his son. Just Water was Jaden's venture, built as part of his environmental activism, and the tension in that moment resonated with audiences who recognized the discomfort of having someone you love unintentionally overshadow you. Another clip that gained traction comes from a 2022 episode of Red Table Talk, the show hosted primarily by Jada Pinkett Smith. In that episode, Will jokingly declared himself the boss of the table. The exchange was lighthearted, and the family laughed, yet when edited alongside other footage, it contributed to a narrative that Will often positions himself at the center, even in spaces created by others. These clips do not depict hostility or abuse. Instead, they suggest a recurring dynamic. A father deeply invested in his children's success, but sometimes unsure how to support them without directing them. To understand the origins of this dynamic, it helps to return to 2006 and the filming of The Pursuit of Happiness. Jaden was 5 years old when he told his father he could play the role of Chris Gardner's son. Although the studio worried it would appear nepotistic, Will pushed forward. The film was a success, and Jaden's performance received praise. So that moment set a precedent. It demonstrated that placing Jaden in front of the camera worked commercially and critically. Yet it also placed a young child into the machinery of Hollywood before he could comprehend the long-term implications. By 2010, Jaden starred in the reboot of The Karate Kid, which grossed hundreds of millions worldwide. He was a teenage box office draw, but the infrastructure around him remained largely controlled by his father. The turning point came with 2013's After Earth, directed by M. Night Shyamalan. Conceived as a bonding project, the film was critically panned. Much of the backlash targeted Jaden. At 15, he reportedly asked about legal emancipation, a request Will later described as heartbreaking. The project, designed to strengthen their partnership, instead created distance. Jaden stepped back from acting and shifted toward music, fashion, and entrepreneurship, building an identity independent of his father's cinematic world. His debut album, Sire, marked the beginning of that separation, signaling that he would chart his own creative path. Parallel to these professional shifts were the Smith family's parenting philosophies. Will and Jada long advocated for radical honesty, minimal punishment, and maximum freedom. In later reflections, Will admitted aspects of that approach were mistakes. Jaden's public health struggles related to extreme dietary choices prompted family intervention on Red Table Talk. Discussions about plant medicine and psychedelics further complicated public perception, especially when stripped of nuance in headlines. These moments, combined with Jada's eventual disclosure, that she and Will had been separated for years before revealing it publicly, reframed the backdrop against which Jaden grew up. Much of his adolescence unfolded amid private marital strain that became public only later. Then came the 2022 Oscars incident. Will's slap of Chris Rock, following a joke about Jada's alopecia, resulted in a decade-long ban from Academy events and a dramatic reputational shift. Jaden's immediate public defense of his father drew criticism from some and sympathy from others. The moment underscored the family's loyalty, but also intensified scrutiny. As Will began speaking more openly about insecurity, mistakes, and growth, a different tone emerged in interviews, one less performative, more reflective. Meanwhile, Jaden's career trajectory continued upward in a different sphere. His appointment as men's creative director for Christian Louboutin signaled full professional autonomy. Fashion, activism, and music became arenas in which he operated without relying on his father's established networks. When photographs surfaced of the family supporting Jaden in Paris, they contrasted sharply with the earlier promotional shoot tension. In those images, Will appeared as an observer rather than a director. The viral footage does not capture private conversations, reconciliations, or growth. It captures snapshots, moments that, when reassembled, suggest a journey from over-involvement to recalibrated support. The distance between directing a shoot and quietly attending a debut in another country marks evolution. Relationships between parents and children, particularly under the glare of global fame, rarely unfold without friction. The Smith family's transparency has made their adjustments visible, sometimes uncomfortably so. Ultimately, the circulating clips reveal less about a fractured bond and more about a relationship shaped by extraordinary circumstances. A father who rose from music to blockbuster films, determined to protect and elevate his children, sometimes struggled to step back. A son who grew up in boardrooms and film sets sought independence in industries his father did not dominate. Over time, both appear to have shifted. The footage documents the earlier posture. Recent public appearances suggest a quieter one. Together, they form a narrative not of collapse, but of adaptation. Two individuals learning, often publicly, how to occupy space in each other's lives without erasing themselves. As the internet continues to dissect archived moments, what often gets lost is the simple truth that relationships evolve in chapters, not clips. The dynamic between Will Smith and Jaden Smith has unfolded across nearly 2 decades of intense public exposure. Very few father-son relationships are tested under studio lights, red carpets, billion-dollar box office expectations, and a 24-hour social media cycle. Every disagreement becomes a headline. Every awkward joke becomes evidence. Every silence becomes speculation. What stands out in the resurfaced footage is not cruelty, but contrast. In earlier years, Will was operating from a mindset shaped by survival and ambition. He built his career methodically, from music to television to film, learning to control every variable possible. That instinct to manage outcomes likely carried into his parenting style. When you have spent your life engineering success, stepping back can feel like negligence rather than support. In the Just Water clip, viewers see a father slipping into director mode automatically. To him, it may have felt like helping refine a product. To audiences, and perhaps to Jaden, it read as intrusion. Jaden, on the other hand, matured inside a structure that was already built. He did not need to fight for entry into rooms. He was born into them. But being born into access creates a different struggle, proving that your place is earned, not inherited. That tension is visible throughout his teenage years. His fashion, choices, philosophical interviews, and unconventional statements were often mocked online. Yet those moments also represented attempts to carve identity separate from the blockbuster image of his father. When he shifted toward environmental activism and launched Just Water, it was more than a business. It was a declaration of independence. The collapse of After Earth remains one of the most pivotal moments in their shared history. For Will, it was a professional setback. For Jaden, it was a formative wound. At 15, absorbing harsh global criticism can reshape confidence permanently. When reports surfaced that Jaden had asked about emancipation, The word itself carried weight far beyond its legal meaning. It symbolized a desire for psychological distance. Whether or not the process advanced, the fact that it was considered speaks volumes about the emotional climate at the time. As years passed, both men seemed to recalibrate. Will's memoir and interviews following the Academy Awards incident showed a level of vulnerability he had rarely displayed before. He openly described insecurity, fear of failure, and the pressure of maintaining a flawless public image. The slap became a rupture, not just in reputation, but in persona. Once the illusion of perfect composure shattered, space opened for introspection. In multiple interviews, he acknowledged parenting missteps and admitted that granting unlimited freedom without adequate structure had unintended consequences. Jaden's trajectory during that same period moved increasingly away from film and toward fashion and music. His creative direction appointment at Christian Louboutin signaled legitimacy beyond celebrity lineage. Luxury fashion operates on a different currency than Hollywood. It demands vision, taste, and innovation more than box office draw. In that arena, Jaden stood on his own merit. The symbolism of his father attending events in support, without overtaking them, was subtle but meaningful. It suggested a shift from architect to audience. Another layer complicating public perception has been the Smith family's long-standing commitment to transparency. Jada Pinkett Smith built Red Table Talk around radical conversation, inviting the world into deeply personal discussions. While that openness fostered empathy for many viewers, it also blurred boundaries. When family interventions, marital separations, and personal revelations become content, the line between healing and spectacle can fade. For children raised within that system, privacy becomes scarce. Jaden and Willow inherited a philosophy they did not design. The internet's instinct is to reduce complex relationships to binary narratives, supportive or controlling, united or fractured. But real family bonds resist such simplification. There is evidence of friction in the archival. Clips, yes, but there is also evidence of loyalty. When the Oscars fallout dominated headlines, Jaden publicly stood beside his father. Whether critics approved or not, the act underscored allegiance. Loyalty does not erase disagreement. It coexists with it. It is also important to recognize growth as a visible theme. In earlier years, Will's energy filled rooms. In more recent appearances, he appears more measured, even deferential. Growth in parent-child relationships often involves renegotiating roles as the child becomes an adult. The shift from authority to ally is rarely seamless. It requires humility from the parent and confidence from the child. Public scrutiny amplifies every misstep along that path. The viral resurgence of old clips says as much about cultural timing as it does about the Smiths. Society is increasingly sensitive to dynamics of control, autonomy, and emotional boundaries. What once appeared playful can now feel problematic under updated social lenses. Context transforms interpretation. A father directing a shoot in 2015 reads differently in 2026, after discussions of consent, agency, and mental health have become mainstream. Ultimately, what the footage captures is a relationship under construction. It shows misalignment, yes, but also resilience. It documents a father who sometimes struggled to separate his ambition from his guidance, and a son who fought to define himself outside inherited fame. Over time, both appear to have adjusted. The Paris dinner photos, the quieter support at fashion, events, the public admissions of mistakes, all point toward recalibration rather than collapse. No single clip can encapsulate the full arc of two lives intertwined by blood and spotlight. The Smith story is not one of clean lines or simple morals. It is a portrait of evolution, messy, public, and ongoing. And perhaps that is why it continues to fascinate. Beneath the celebrity, beneath the headlines, it reflects a universal truth. Parents and children must relearn each other as they grow. The difference here is that the learning has unfolded on the world's largest stage. What makes this story continue to resonate is the uncomfortable familiarity within it. Strip away the red carpets, the billion-dollar box office numbers, and the designer fashion houses, and what remains is something deeply human. A father learning how to let go and a son learning how to stand on his own without severing the bond entirely. With Will Smith and Jaden Smith, the difference is that every stage of that learning curve has been archived, clipped, reposted, and reinterpreted millions of times. The internet tends to freeze people in their worst or most awkward moments. A tense promo shoot becomes a defining trait. A poorly timed joke becomes proof of character. But growth rarely goes viral the same way conflict does. The quieter shifts, the decision to step back, to listen more, to show up without controlling. The Room do not generate the same dramatic headlines. Yet those subtle changes often mark the most significant evolution. Since the fallout from the Academy Awards, Will's public tone has noticeably softened. He speaks more about accountability, emotional regulation, and the cost of pride. That shift matters in the context of fatherhood. Children, even adult children, watch how their parents handle failure. In many ways, Jaden witnessed his father's most vulnerable chapter in real time. That shared vulnerability can either fracture a relationship or deepen it. At the same time, Jaden's independence feels less reactive now and more grounded. His work in fashion, music, and sustainability no longer reads as rebellion, but as establishment. He is not running away from his father's legacy. He is simply building a parallel one. And perhaps that is where their story currently rests. Not in rivalry, not in rupture, but in recalibrated respect.